As a personal trainer and somewhat of a bodybuilding slash muscle gaining enthusiast, the one thing that really grinds my freaking gears is misinformation. And well, welcome to the fitness industry because there's enough of that to go around. But today I'm going to give you a guide on how to actually train for gaining muscle. Exactly what you need to do. It's not going to be the bullshit theoretical type video. It's going to be actual practical tips on how to do this. So yeah, let's go. So here's the no BS guide to training for muscle growth. First of all, I want to start with this because I feel like this is so underrated, and I feel like not enough people actually talk about this. Progression is everything. I want you to read the middle quote that you see right here first. Bodybuilding is a performance sport. Start treating it as such. Please, I am done with this whole, bodybuilding, you have to do a lot of volume, you have to, get in a lot of work, the sessions have to take very long. I'm gonna touch on that later, but that's just not the case. Bodybuilding is as much of a performance sport as powerlifting is, as strongman is, as all those other sports are. The thing is, the way we do this is very different. I'm also gonna touch on that later. So, progression is absolutely everything. You have to pick a few key movements per muscle. Now, how many you should pick, it very much depends. I'm gonna say you don't want to pick too many movements per muscle, right? If you're doing a bicep curl, I straight up don't want to see you do like more than 5 curls for that, okay? Not more than 5 variations. Probably 4 is the absolute maximum that I would go to. This guide, by the way, is for both beginners and intermediates. Is very important to make that distinction, because as a beginner, for example, you can do 2 different variations of a bicep curl and that's going to work absolutely fine. As an intermediate, maybe you want to give a bit more variation, but even then, picking 2 movements and just getting strong as hell at them, that's what's going to end up giving you that actual muscle growth, right? And that's exactly to the second point. Get freaking strong. This is simply the most important thing. Pick a movement, get freaking strong at it, get very good at it, but don't stray too far into strength sport territory. This is important because I just told you about powerlifting, about strongmen, and that bodybuilding is not that much different. It's not, in the sense that we have to focus very much on our performance in certain lifts. That's the same as those sports. The key difference is that in powerlifting, in strongman, in all those different ones, the most important thing is getting strong. It is the end result, not as much the process. What I mean by that is that in strongman, it doesn't matter how well your training block, for example, is going. In powerlifting, the same. It matters how much at the end on the meet, right, on the competition, you end up lifting. In bodybuilding, that's not the case. We don't have a certain moment where we have to showcase our strength in terms of a 1 rep max, in terms of other things. We just have to consistently keep getting stronger. That's the key difference. The process in bodybuilding is way, way, way more important than it is in these strength sports. So yes, bodybuilding is a performance sport because we have to consistently keep tracking our progression and our performance. We simply just don't have to showcase it at any one moment. That's the key difference. To keep track of your progress, I don't only recommend you log your progress, it is a necessity. For bodybuilding, it is simply a necessity to log your progress. At some point, you can get very far. Okay, I'm going to give you a little anecdote. I know someone at the gym that got to, let's say, mid-intermediate territory, like beginning to mid-intermediate. He looked good. He was quite strong on a lot of movements. But at some point, he just kept stalling. And he was like, what's your advice? I simply told him, do you log your progress or no? Do you know 3 weeks ago what you did on your chest press, on your squat, etc., etc.? He had no clue. He didn't even know what logging his progress would mean, how he would do that. even though that is literally extremely important. You have to log your progress. I recommend boost camps, your Samsung Notes, Fit Notes, Excel, anything like this. It really doesn't matter. I'm not sponsored. I don't care what you actually use, but use one of these because it is very important. Okay, so that was by far, if you watch this far into the video, that's for sure the most important part. But there's going to be more because now you're going to see exactly how to build your own program. First of all, you want to pick how many days that you want to lift. I recommend a minimum of 2 days. 1 day lifting, you can get results by that, especially in the beginning, but it's not going to be enough. 2 days is very doable. Look at people like Alex Leonidas, formerly known as Alpha Destiny. He got a lot of his results by training full body two times a week. It's going to be quite grueling though. They're going to be very long and hard sessions. So if you want to do that, fine. I normally recommend anywhere from about 3 to 4 days, right? A maximum of 5 days, I think, for people that are more advanced. 5 days can certainly work, but it's getting into that. Are we not doing too much territory? 6 days, in my opinion, it's not going to be very extra productive or whatever. It's not necessary. So 3 to 4 days is perfect. On 3 days, you would have a full body program. On 4 days, you would have something like an upper lower. Both can work absolutely fine. So you want to lift a minimum of 2 to 5 days, and you have to then look at what time you have per session. Now, I realize very much that not everyone has the luxury of having a lot of time. That's not a problem. You can get very far by doing full body 3 days a week, anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, if you are very efficient with your time. In this case, you have to pick lifts that you enjoy, the next point, but they also need to, well, first and foremost, getting back to that time per session part, they need to then be realistic for you to be able to do as much work as you would want to, if that makes sense. You have to be able to warm up very quickly in that sense, and you have to probably superset a lot. That's fine. So you pick lifts. First of all, you choose how many days that you want to lift, anywhere from 2 to 5 days. You pick how long you want to lift, and then you pick lifts that you enjoy. But they do definitely have to have a good both eccentric and concentric phase. If you don't know what that means, the eccentric phase is when you're going down most often or going back in a movement. For example, if you're doing, let's say, a lat pull down, you're going from here, that's towards your body. In that sense, you are making a positive movement, a concentric. Going back is the eccentric. They need to have both. Why? Because if you're missing one, you're probably missing out on a lot of muscle gains. I can go into that on a later video, exactly the theory behind that, but just do something with both. Definitely the eccentric in this case is also very important. You don't want to skip out on either one. Secondly, they need to make sense. Don't defy gravity. Again, I'm going to give you another anecdote in this case. So a girl showed me that she was playing hockey and she wanted to do a sort of shoulder exercise, and she saw one that was done on a bench where she was going this way. She was laying down on the bench with her chest, right? She was going this way and then pressing away from the bench. If that makes sense in your mind, then think about it very logically. In which way are you pressing? You're pressing away from gravity. Like, gravity is pulling the dumbbell down and you're trying to press it like this. That doesn't make any sense. So getting back to the point, you have to pick lifts that you enjoy, but they also definitely need to make sense because, if you're not following the rules of gravity, unless you're an alien, welcome. Okay, you also have to pick proper rep ranges, and you need to stick to them. I see a lot of... Okay, first of all, you see I recommend the 4 to 6 rep range. This is a rep range that is not very often used, but can be very effective on movements like Let's say a weighted pull-up or a weighted dip or sometimes even something like a squat. The problem with it is that a lot of people, when they're that low in the rep range, they'll be like, you know what, going a bit higher. Let's do 2 to 3 reps. Let's go. In that case, you're not sticking to your rep range. Stick to the program, okay? Create a rep range for yourself, stick to it. And if you really want to change it, you can, but make that a strategic change, not just a sudden spur of the moment change. So I recommend a 4 to 6, a 5 to 8, 6 to 10, 8 to 12, 10 to 15. If you don't know exactly how rep ranges work, let me explain it very quickly to you. If we're taking, for example, the 6 to 10 rep range, it means that you have a certain weight for a movement where you want to be able to do a minimum amount of 6 reps with that weight. Obviously with proper form, blah, 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 right? You are going to keep at that weight and try to increase the reps until you get to 10 reps, in which case you increase the weight. And probably what happens, that very automatically happens, if you increase it from anywhere to 2.5 kg to 5 kg, which means 5 pounds to around like 10 to 11 pounds, if you do that, you're probably going to get back to that 6 reps automatically. That's kind of how the rep ranges work. You might be able to do like 7 or something, in which case, great, you're still in between that. And then you work up again to 10 reps. You can basically do this for freaking infinity. You can do this for so long. This works always. So that's awesome. Pick any range in between this one, in between these. They have to make sense though, right? For a bicep curl, 5 to 8, you can do it, but it's getting a bit 4 to 6, probably wouldn't recommend it for a bicep curl. 6 to 10 and 8 to 12 are amazing. 10 to 15, can do it, but just see what you like in that sense, okay? Then the last point on this, trust the progress for a longer time, okay? You need to trust the progress for a minimum amount of 3 months. I'd say 6 weeks maybe, but like 3 months on the same program, doing the same stuff, only making minor changes if you feel like they are absolutely necessary. That's what's going to help you gain muscle in your training. Okay, now on how much volume or just work in general should you do? Again, the first thing I look at is it enough to progress? If it's enough to progress, you're doing fine. You don't probably need to do more, okay? I see so many people that do around, let's say anywhere from 6 to 10 working sets of a muscle group per week. And they constantly think they need to do more. Why, brother, why? It's not necessary if you're progressing. In fact, if you're going to do more work than that, you're likely to burn out. I talked about this recently on my podcast, on which I had my 2 friends, Aiden and Sandwagon, Calvin, on. They talked about how deloads are kind of stupid for a bodybuilder, because if you're doing so much volume that you at some point need to take a few days off of training, is that worth the extra volume that you're getting in? Why not just do a little less volume and never have to take those rest days, right? Simple. So again, enough to progress. In fact, I am a relatively lower volume type guy. I've never been super high in my volume. So I recommend anywhere from 2 to 15 sets per muscle group per week. 15 is really pushing it in my opinion. I would most often recommend 12 sets as a maximum, but you know, some people really do need a bit of extra work. So 2 to 15 I think is very reasonable. Why only 2? Because some muscle groups, take forearms for example. If you do 2 sets of forearms per week, if you're just starting out, you're probably going to see progress. You probably don't need to do that much more. You can. You absolutely can, but it's not necessary, okay? It is therefore better to start low and progress in that volume, so like accumulate volume, do more later, Because again, if you're progressing on 2 sets per week, why take time out of your day to do even more, hoping for better results? Why not do that later when it's actually necessary, when you're starting to notice that you are slowly declining in your progress, right? Why? So that's all to the point where that you see right there. If you can't keep doing it for multiple months in a row, it's too much. Simple as that. If you feel like you're burning out, then sometimes it might be your sleep or your diet, but often it's just you doing too much. Make the most out of the volume you do, because then it will be enough. If you only pick those 2 sets, then take them to freaking failure. That's my next point. How hard should you lift? Fucking hard. I'm sorry. That's just the truth. You have to, as a bodybuilder, right? I compared bodybuilding just now to strongman and powerlifting. They are similar in a certain sense, but they are different in one very key aspect, which is the RPE or RIR. If you don't know what that means, don't worry. They simply mean how hard you are lifting. RPE is on a scale of 1 to 10, meaning that 10 is the absolute maximum. You cannot do any more of a lift with, that to your head. RIR is reversed, right? So it's how many reps you have left in a tank, with 1 being, or 0 basically being that same, okay? If we're looking at RPE specifically, I realize that I put it down a bit confusingly. But if we look at RPE specifically, we're going to be between 8 to 10 on any working set. That's pretty rough. Like, imagine doing bicep curls, right? 10 is this. You're going to be in between, 2 reps away from that. Probably for a bicep curl, even 1. And like literally there where you're like, oh, I can't do this. That's how hard you should probably lift almost always for muscle growth. Yes, this includes leg movements, guys. I'm sorry. You have to lift hard, okay? You have to truly give it your all. However, you should be able to still recover, okay? If you're going so hard to a point where you are not recovering, I'm going to say most often it's not really the training, but the fact that you're just not recovering well, you're not sleeping well, you're not eating well, and it might be also that you're doing too much work, so too much volume for that muscle group. But it's important to always be able to recover and to progress. Again, progression is everything, guys. It's key, okay? Now, on drop sets, right? I'm pretty sure you know what a drop set is, and if you don't, it's simply where you're doing a certain amount of weights and you're pushing it to failure, and then you're dropping that weight and going to failure again, right? Drop sets are probably not necessary, and they're probably also not that great, because what you're doing is simply making it so that you're doing even more work that makes it harder to recover from. However, I still do them sometimes. Why? Because they're kind of fun. They're very hard, which makes them even fun. And I'm doing it on movements where I know that I'm not doing that much volume. If I'm only doing 4 sets of a muscle group per week, then I can take at least like 1 of those to a drop set if I still recover well. You know what I mean? But don't stress about this too much. Always think first, okay, let's make the most out of every single set that I have. Let's push it hard as hell. That's the most important thing, period. Okay, now, should you bench, squat, or deadlift? The answer is yes. At least a form of these. Yes, absolutely. You have to do a press. You have to do a form of a squat. You have to do a form of a hinge or a deadlift. It's essential if you want to gain muscle. Now, you can do these lifts as they are, so the normal bench, squat, or deadlift. Or you can do versions that are a little bit more optimized for muscle growth. So, for example, the deadlift is a very good example, right? A lot of people talk a lot of shit about deadlifting for muscle growth. And I kind of get it, because it does take a lot of energy out of you. So that means the stimulus to fatigue ratio is, questionable. However, I still think that the deadlift does come with its own benefits, specifically for the lower back, for example, the spinal erectors. I do think it's one of the best movements for that, and the traps in combination, right? But you can definitely instead do something like an RDL, a Romanian deadlift, or a stiff-legged deadlift. I do those myself. For the squat, you can take the normal squat as it is, and some people are very much built for squatting. They'll hit the quads perfectly. They'll hit hamstrings and glutes very well. And some people will prefer to have their heels a little elevated or do something like a hack squat or a pendulum squat or whatever. All of them are absolutely fine, and it depends on your goals as well. If you want to do a squat more for like the glutes, then you're going to do more of a, low bar type squat instead of a normal high bar squat. So you can do all of these or a variation of them. And as I said, they do come with their own benefits in a sense. The bench press is the only one where I'm like, you know what? I wouldn't even take a variation of a bench myself. I love the bench press. Like, it's one of the things that helped me, build my chest as it is the most, especially this past year. But that's for another video. So how should you now lift or execute your lifts for muscle growth? First of all, you have to control the negative. Remember what I told you, what that negative is? It's when you're going back from that lat pull down, when you're going down on a squat, etc. You have to be able to control this, but this can have many forms. A perfect example is Sam Sulek. A lot of people talk shit about how Sam Sulek lifts, but let me tell you, that guy always controls the negative, okay? It might be faster than some people do it. He might be pumping out the reps a bit more, but he is controlled. He is always controlled. He is in control of his whole body, of the whole movement. So that's an absolutely fine way to lift if you want. Compared to Sam, I probably have a little bit more control in how I lift, just how I personally like it, but it's not necessary. You can do this however you want as long as you control it. That being said, you do always have to be as explosive as you can on the positive. So when you're going, for example, up, right? Or when you're pulling towards you on the lat pull down. Be as explosive as you can, because when you're approaching failure, the bar is going to get a lot slower, and then you can assess what that means for you in terms of how many reps you can still do. Basically, just how hard it frigging is. I mean, if I'm doing a bicep curl and it starts to go like this, then I know I'm probably close to failure, right? Now, you do have to treat every rep as equally important, okay? What I mean by that is some people I see that, start talking during the first few reps that they're doing on like a heavy squat or a heavy deadlift or whatever. Don't do that. Especially not on those movements. Keep your control, keep your focus, you're executing. Remember, bodybuilding is a performance sport, okay? We want to constantly perform. Now, I fully get it if you're like, I don't know, doing higher rep bicep curls that you're just a little bit less locked in the first few reps, but always stay focused, okay? That also relates to the next point, which is keeping your technique consistent. Dude, how many people I've seen that start a set perfectly and then just randomly, I don't know, start pressing from their shoulders on a bench or something, or using their lower back on a squat. Keep your technique consistent. Of course, it's going to deviate a little bit as soon as you approach failure, but keep it as consistent as you can. Don't suddenly let your other muscles take over. You're trying to target a certain muscle, right? So keep it like that, okay? Now, for this video, that's all that I had to tell you. I hope I helped you with something here. I hope all of your questions have been answered on how to train for muscle. But if you do have any other questions, then please comment them down below. Ask anything that you want to know. Video just cut out. But what I was saying is I would love to make any more videos that you guys would want in here. Check out all of my other videos if you want other information. Like, subscribe, all of that. Check out the podcast that I did, and that's it, guys. See you later.